Tonight, I'm going to be talking about reading comprehension specifically. I think I pretty much speak for everyone here when I say this is definitely the most difficult part of the SAT. I think this is more hard than Module 2 math. It's definitely more hard than Desmos. It's more hard than any of the other things that you could theoretically be doing to prepare for the SAT. And what I mean when I say comprehension, I think this is pretty self explanatory to most people, but I basically mean understanding passages. So you can read the words on a passage, but how do you actually understand what is being said when you read it? How do you actually visualize in your mind what the passage is saying? And I'll definitely say myself, this is something that I've struggled with a lot myself. I honestly kind of thought when I first took the SAT that this was something you could not improve in. I thought this was something where it's kind of like one of the more luck-based aspects of the SAT, where maybe you're going to get a really good passage that'll be super easy, that'll make a lot of sense, or a bunch of really good passages that'll be super easy, make a lot of sense, and you'll just be fine. Or maybe you won't, in which case you're just screwed and you have absolutely no chance of doing well in the SAT. But now, after looking at it a lot more, I found that thankfully this is not the case. Comprehension is definitely something that some people may have an easier time with because maybe they've read more novels in their life or something, but anybody can learn it for sure. Anybody can improve in it, and if you spend enough time, definitely anybody can actually get really good at it. So in this call, I'm going to be talking about more specifically how to actually improve at reading comprehension. I'm going to be going into more depth in this call than I've done in previous calls in comprehension because this one is going to be just about the comprehension aspect of things. I'm not going to be talking about actually selecting the answer at all in this call. That'll be saved for next week. So I'm going to give some tips in here that I haven't given in other calls before. So the first thing I really want to say, this is basically a thesis of this whole call, is nobody really struggles with reading comprehension on the SAT. I genuinely believe this to be the case. I don't think comprehension is a big thing that people are struggling with. Rather, they're struggling with these three things that I'm about to say throughout this video. The first of which is vocab. Let me give it an example. Let's say we have this sentence here. Actually, for some reason there's a... Okay, so give a shot at the sentence, try reading it for a second, and see if you can understand what is being said here. So the sentence is definitely a little bit confusing, but I think probably for the most part, you can understand, at least in a general sense, what this sentence is actually saying. All the words make pretty good sense. It's pretty clear what's going on here. There's nothing too confusing. Basically, what they're saying here is that this group, they agreed to this plan, but it wasn't because they thought it was a good plan. It's more because they just thought that if they didn't do it, they'd be like held responsible for past mistakes or something like that. They get into trouble if they don't agree to it. But now let me give you that exact same sentence with just a little bit more difficult vocab. So you can see this here. The committee sanctioned the proposal not because they believe it efficacious, but because repudiating it would have compelled them to concede that the stratagem they had championed for years was the very impediment now hindering them. You can probably see here that this makes a lot less sense. If you read this for the first time without seeing the previous sentence, you'd probably be really, really confused what is actually going on here. What does efficacious mean? What does sanctioned even mean if you don't know that word? What does repudiating mean? Many people do not know that word. Stratagem, impediment. So a lot of really confusing words here. And so the only thing that changed between these two sentences is the vocab. Nothing else about it changed. It has the exact same meaning. I literally put the sentence into Claude. And I said, just give me the same sentence with harder vocabulary. This is exactly the same thing. So you can see here, a big thing that is messing you up in these questions is the vocab side of things, not the actual comprehension of the sentences. Because the way it works is kind of like this. It's kind of like you have a roadmap that you're looking for. And let's say you're starting here and trying to get to here. If you know every single word that's in the sentence, it's pretty clear everything you need to do to get to your goal. It's like, okay, I just read this word, read this word, read this word. Okay, pretty simple. But if you don't know one of the words or multiple of the words, it's more like the map looks maybe a little bit more like this. It's like you're reading a portion of the map and you got like a piece that's cut off or something. So like someone took a bite out of the map over here and now it's completely removed. So now you can't even see where you're trying to get to. Or let's say they took another bite out of it over on this part. And so now it's like, you have this very disheveled looking map here. How are you supposed to use this to really figure things out? It's going to get a lot more confusing with every successive bite that's being taken out of it. When you're reading a sentence, it's kind of like your brain is looking at each word. And your brain is trying to think, is this a word I've seen before? And if it is, it makes sense. It's clear. It's concise. You can understand it. But if there's a word you don't know, your brain's just kind of like, I don't really know what to do with this. Like, oh, let's look at this one. If I read this, the, so I think we know what the means. Group, yes, we know what a group is. Said, so the group said something that makes sense. Yes, we know what it means to say yes, you agreed to something. To the plan, agreed to doing this plan. Not, okay, so it's going to say something that's not happening. So we can understand every single word here. Meanwhile, if we look at this sentence, it's like the committee. Okay, say I don't know what committee means. First, I already have a word here that I don't know. So it's like the something. And let's say I don't know this word, something, the something, not because they believed it's something. So now you can see here, if you don't know what these words mean, it's going to get a lot more confusing very fast. Like you're just seeing like random stuff here, basically. So, what is the solution to figuring out this problem? If you're like a low IQ individual, maybe your first thought would be, let's just learn a bunch of Quizlet cards. Let's just memorize like as many Quizlet things as we can, try to memorize every single word we can, and try to get really good at it that way. But this is obviously not a good idea because there's like literally thousands of words you could memorize. You're probably not going to memorize the exact ones you need, and there's just way too much to do here. So instead, the real strategy to get through this is guessing. Because here's the thing, when you look at a sentence like this, it's going to be very rare that like all 10 of the words, like say there's 10 words in a sentence, it's going to be very rare that all 10 of the words are words you do not know. Like it's very rare that's going to be literally 0 out of 10. I mean, if it literally is 0 out of 10, then okay, you might be kind of cooked here, I'll be honest. Like you probably don't have much of a chance of getting through this one. But it's probably is not 0 out of 10. It's probably more like maybe you know, let's say 7 out of 10 of the words, and there's just 3 you don't know. Or maybe even more than that. Maybe you know like 8 out of 10 of the words. And it's just 2. You probably have enough information just in what is given to you to understand what that missing word or missing words mean. When you look at a sentence like this and there's some words that are missing, you can just think to yourself, what does it look like that word means based off of the other words that are here in the sentence? Based off of that, what would make sense for the missing, confusing words to be? And your guess is probably going to be right because the problem with these questions is what happens to most students is they see a thing like this. They see some really confusing set of words like this and they don't know what some of the words mean. And as a result, they just basically give up. And I know this because this is literally what I would do whenever I saw something like this. Whenever I would see something really confusing when I first took the SAT and I didn't know what the words meant, I would just think to myself, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't know how to do this passage. I'm going to just get this problem wrong and just move on. You really don't want to do that because chances are you do know enough to get through it. So let me give a quick example of this. We have this passage question here. So I'm going to read through each of this one, and most of these words I probably will know, like is the case for most passage questions, but probably a few I'll not know, or at least many people would not know. So if we look at this, although only a small fraction of the city's residents regularly attend community board meetings. So let's say I don't know what community board meetings is. So they're saying a small amount of the people they attend community something. What would be a thing that people would typically attend in a community? Well, maybe like something to improve the community, maybe something for like coming up with new ideas for how to like get new projects passed or something. So that would make sense. That's probably what community board meetings mean if I don't know what that means. Those who do are disproportionately likely to volunteer for neighborhood improvement projects. Let's say I don't know what this word means. Let's say I don't know what these words mean either. So, okay, those people who do are disproportionately. We have that thing here like like DIS, seems like something like not, and it says likely to volunteer. So it kind of sounds like, okay, they're more likely than not to volunteer for this thing. That just seems of what they're trying to say here. And then the other thing here, neighborhood improvement projects. Again, I may not really know what that's referring to, but it looks like something, okay, so things to improve the neighborhood. So maybe they're like trying to install like a new road or trying to install like a new activity in the community or like a building or something like that, something to improve the community. One plausible reason is that attending the meeting exposes people to specific local needs. So if we just look at that there, if we don't know what plausible means, we could just say one reason, probably it means something like a likely reason just because of everything else said in the sentence. And then you see here specific local needs. Again, you may not know what that means, but probably just means something like what people need in the community. It's pretty obvious there in this exposure. So same thing through all of this. You just look at what you do know, and with that, you can probably figure out what these words mean. And I'd say this is honestly probably one of the biggest things for reading comprehension if you're struggling with it, vocab. Because it may not seem like it, but chances are what's happening on a lot of these questions is you're seeing these like really complex scientific or like historical passages and you don't know what to do. And as a result, you're just giving up when in actuality, you do probably know what you need to know to solve it. I've often told the story of a student who was actually an international student here in the community. And I basically went through this process with him where he was really confused on passages. He really could not understand them. And that's partially because he wasn't a native English speaker. And what I literally just did is I did not define any of the words he was struggling with. And I just had him tell me all the words he actually did know in a passage. And we quickly discovered that just with the words he did know, it was more than enough to actually understand the passage and get it right. And he was kind of amazed when he first did it the first time. He's like, wow, I guess I know way more than I thought I did. And then the second thing that you may be struggling with, though, is maybe you're missing the deeper meanings of the passage that you're reading. You probably are familiar with this new movie that just came out, Obsession. I've not seen myself, but I'm pretty familiar with the plot, as I think pretty much everybody is. So it's this movie about this guy who does some kind of weird thing, and he makes this girl fall in love with him, and it's, like, weird, and she gets, like, obsessed with him. I guess that's probably why they call it obsession, and then as a result, it goes into, like, a horror movie, and, like, somewhere along the line, they end up, like, fighting or something. So, it's this big thing, and it's really popular right now, but if you think about it, do you think the creator of Obsession, I think there's this guy called, like, Curry Barker or something, do you think that all he was trying to do was just tell this basic story about this magical thing that made her fall in love with him, and that's all he was trying to say? You think he just wanted to tell this simple story and he didn't want to say anything else beyond what was said in the story? Maybe, but probably not. Probably more likely what was happening was he's telling this story that's a horror movie, this kind of weird magical scenario. And by doing that, he's trying to explain some deeper themes about society, about life, about the world. Maybe some of the themes could be like, why you shouldn't think that you know what's best for you. Like he thought that if this girl fell in love with him, it would be the best thing in the world, but in actuality, it wasn't. Maybe another theme could be like playing God. Like you don't want to have all the power in the world to like make people do your will because it leads to bad things happening a lot of the time. Maybe it could be stuff about like love and like why, you maybe don't actually love the person that you think you do or all these different things. So all these deeper themes, these deeper meanings that are beyond what is just said in the core script itself. And so this is the kind of thing like, if you've ever taken an English class before, you probably had a teacher tell you like, oh, they're trying to say like a deeper theme here and they're like trying to make you analyze the themes of the story. And maybe you hated doing that when you had to do it in English class, but for the SAT, it's actually low key a little bit important. Another good example is something like Hamilton. Probably familiar with this as well. It is a nonfiction story. It was a story that actually happened, but they have some deeper themes in here as well, like themes about ambition, about what it looks like to follow your dreams and try to prove yourself in front of all of these other people, all these different things. So those are the deeper themes in both of those. So when you're reading an SAT passage, chances are it has some deeper themes here, some deeper meanings than what is just directly said in the passage. And chances are you actually kind of need to know what these deeper themes are in order to actually have any chance of solving it. Because for these like inference questions, that's literally the entire point. Like you have to figure out what is the deeper meaning in order to make that inference. So if you look at this thing that I had before, this is the simpler version of the sentence. So the group, they said yes to the plan, not because they thought it would work, but because saying no would meant admitting that the idea they had back was the very thing holding them back. So that may seem like a basic thing, but think about what's really being said here. This group, they're basically like so prideful, like they're so okay, I'm obsessed, obsession reference. They're so obsessed with their self-image, or I guess their image to other people, that they literally were willing to agree to something that was a bad idea just so these other people would like think they're good. Like so they would not seem like they're bad at their jobs, I guess. So they were so focused on this that they were literally willing to make a bad choice just to continue their image in front of society or something. So this group is probably like a very like, I don't know, maybe like a very conceited group. Maybe they're like somebody who's like really, not focused on making the best quality decisions. They're somebody who's very easily swayed by different emotional factors. So a bunch of really bad things about this group. And so now if I understand that, it would be a lot easier for me to actually like make, solve the question. When I see the choices for this one, I'll be able to more clearly think like, okay, it's something about this group being like really obsessed with their emotions, something about them being very easily swayed, and that probably be something related to one of the choices. So the way to solve this problem, how can you actually get yourself to think about these deeper meanings as you read the passage? Now, I guess in a basic sense, I could just say practice, because this is the kind of thing where I think, you guys are all like 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds. Chances are you actually probably just like not as experienced in doing this as like an adult is, because I think there is really something like about becoming an adult, like, getting older, that you start to do this more because you have to like be involved in like more complex situations with people. You have to be involved in like relationships, stuff with work, which you typically are not exposed to as much as like a high school. But how can we actually just force ourselves to do this? Because we don't really have time for that. So the thing I would recommend is translate the passages as you read it. What I mean by this is a thing I say in a lot of the videos I have. Basically, after you read each sentence, summarize it in your mind as if you're explaining it to somebody else. The reason why this solves the problem is because it basically forces you to actually think about what you're reading. What you might be doing right now is just reading each sentence and then immediately going to the next sentence and then immediately going to the next sentence and just like putting all these words in your brain without really thinking about what they mean. By doing this, it kind of forces you to like, okay, take a step back, actually think what is being said here. It's not just like the core words here. It's like thinking, okay, what is actually going on in the sentence I just read? And as a result of doing that, you're probably more likely to make these kinds of deeper understandings. You're more likely to think about what's actually being said. It's like if you watch the movie Obsession and then you, after watching it, like take 30 minutes in the parking lot of the movie theater and talk to your friends about it and saying like, okay, what did this movie actually mean? You're probably going to understand the movie a lot better than if you just watch it and then immediately like go back to your regular day to day life. I'm going to translate basically each part of this sentence as I read it. I could just do this at the end of the sentence, but this is a pretty complex sentence, so it'd be good to do it as I read it. So the group said yes to the plan, not because they thought it would work. Okay, so that first thing is saying this group, they did not actually think that this plan was a good idea. They thought it was like a bad idea, but they still agreed to it. But because saying no would have meant admitting that the idea they had backed for years was the very thing holding them back. Okay, so the reason they still agreed to it was because if they admitted that it was a bad idea, they would basically be admitting that they had been backing something that was really bad. Like they would have been admitting that they had made a really bad mistake. That's what they're really saying here. Rather than just reading those words and having to understand it just off the words themselves, with this deeper like analysis that I'm doing, it makes a lot more sense. Let me do the same thing in this sentence or in this passage here. In a community newsletter, the parks director wrote that last summer the Saturday market drew only a handful of vendors and that some visitors left early because there were only a few shaded seats. So So in this newspaper, basically, the director said that the market, it only had a few people come to it. So only a few people came to the market. So imagine like a very dead market. It's like only like 5 people there, and it's like really, really quiet. And then also some visitors left early because there were few shaded seats. Okay, so nobody wanted to be there because it was like really hot. Like the sun was like beating down on them, like it is basically every day right now. And so they just did not want to be there as well. So now you can see I'm starting to actually understand more what was being said in that sense. I can imagine here there's some problems here at the market, there's some difficulty, and it's not really that good for the consumers. This spring, after the market was moved to a plaza with trees and more benches were added, a local report described the Saturday market as busy and comfortable, noting that several vendors sold out by noon. Okay, so now the market is a lot more busy. There's a lot more people there. And the reason why is because they have actual trees and they have actual benches. So it's actually like not terrible to be there. The reporter also mentioned that having covered the last summer's market and called it sparse. Okay, so the last market was sparse and this new one was like really busy. So you can see here, if you're just watching me go through this passage, you can understand even yourself what is being said. Like even if you did not read the passage, you can kind of just get based off what I'm saying here, what is happening. And that's how it should be. You should basically be summarizing each sentence as if you're explaining it to somebody who has not even read the passage before. If you can explain it in a way that somebody who has not even read the passage before still will understand it, that's basically the indication that you're doing this right. Another thing, make sure that you're not just waiting until the end of the passage to do it. You should do it after each individual sentence. The reason why is kind of like, think again about obsession. Let's say that you waited until after you finished watching the movie to really think about what was happening in it. You may kind of have to do that because it is, a movie in the theaters. But what's a better idea is to actually think about the movie as you're watching it. Like think about what do these things mean because maybe you'll actually like catch something as you go through it and like maybe it'll make more sense in your mind. You're much more likely to miss something if you just wait until the end of the movie to just think about what all the deeper symbolism was. So same thing with this. You're probably more likely to miss something if you wait until the end of the passage to actually think about it and like restate it in your mind. Third thing that can go wrong with comprehension, the third reason that you may be struggling with this, is that you're getting confused on the sentence structure itself. Now, I would say this is definitely a smaller thing than the other stuff I said, honestly. Like, you may think this is the biggest thing, but I'd say it's definitely not as big as the vocab and the deeper meaning stuff. So definitely focus on those two first. But you may occasionally just read a passage where you're just like, you're feeling like this person here. It just does not make a lot of sense. And a good example of this might be the passage or the sentence that I gave before. So you can see here, though the sentence does make sense, though it does use pretty simple terminology, it's pretty convoluted how they're putting it. Like they have this first part here, and it says, not because they thought it would work, but because it's like this, like, what's the word? The contradiction is like the not thing. So really confusing here. And you have all these other words here at the end that's like adding this whole big long explanation. So when you have passages like this, there's a pretty big chance you're just going to get confused as you read it. Another good example of this might be this sentence here. You probably noticed how when I read this first sentence in a community newsletter, I kind of like had to take a step back for a second after I read it. Like I read way too much information there and I kind of had to really, walk myself through it before I really gave my explanation. So if this happens, if it feels like there's way too much stuff going on and you're just getting confused for that reason, the easy solution to this is chunking it. Rather than waiting until the end of the sentence to summarize it, just summarize it as you go through the sentence for the first time. So do the same thing that I said for this other one here, translate it, but do it as you go through the sentence if it's really confusing. So we see here a high school band director wants to know whether a brief warm up period would improve her students' playing accuracy. So what I may want to do instead of reading that whole thing is I might say, okay, high school band director wants to know whether a brief warm up period. So the director they want to know whether warming up before they started would improve her students' playing accuracy. So basically, would make them play their musical instruments better. So there's the two chunks there, first chunk and then the second chunk, and I translated each one. On two separate mornings, okay, so on two separate days, basically, she divided the 40-member band into two equal groups. Okay, so she split these two groups, 20 members each, and yeah. One group began playing their music immediately. Okay, so one group immediately just started suddenly playing their music. While the other group spent 5 minutes performing simple scales and breathing exercises before starting the same music. Oh, so the other group had like a warm up period, a starting up period. During each session, the director recorded a number of wrong notes each musician played. So they recorded how many bad notes each person played. The group that warmed up made noticeably fewer errors than the group that did not. Okay, so warming up, believe it or not, does help. So you can see here, rather than reading every single sentence all the way through, I was just chunking each sentence and giving a brief explanation after each one. And that one makes a lot of sense in my mind. It would have been a lot more confusing if I waited until the end of every single individual sentence to do this stuff. Now, you can wait until the end of each sentence, but I'd really say to only do that if it's a really, really short, very simple sentence. If it's something more complicated like this, it's probably a good idea if you have the ability to do it as you read the sentence, basically. So these are the three things. And I would guess that pretty much everybody watching this is probably struggling with all three. It's not like you're just struggling with one rather than the others. You're probably struggling with vocab, you're probably struggling with sentence structure, and you're probably missing the deeper meanings in the passages. So the solution to these is guess when you see a confusing word, translate the passages, and then break the passages up into smaller pieces when you're translating. And I generally think if you do these three different things, you're going to improve your accuracy significantly on these passages. But the one issue, obviously, is that a lot of people aren't going to do this. And it's kind of thing where if you're right-handed, let's say, imagine I force you to only use your left hand forever. I just like very evilly force you to do this. You probably would basically hate it. It would be extremely difficult to do. And you probably would not even continue with it. You'd probably just give up like midway through and just go back to using your right hand because you're like, screw this. This is basically what I'm asking you to do here because this process is definitely very hard. It's very confusing. It's very difficult to do. You're probably going to go through this process and, do these different things and eventually like get tired of it. You're going to get bored of it. You're going to stop wanting to do it. The thing you have to do is basically push through these. You got to force yourself to still do this regardless because it's really not if, it's more when you feel the urge to skip out on this and stop doing it. It's going to probably happen. And you have to, when it happens, identify that you got to do this. This is definitely the best way to improve. And if you don't do this, you're just going to continue being stuck and not improving in the passage questions. Now, if you want a good way of practicing this work, I did just in Mission 1400 Plus create this thing here in the full reading and writing course. If you go down to this, it's just a pretty simple AI prompt that you can put in to Claude, ChatGPT, and it will generate for you passage questions. And you can actually practice summarizing the passages based on your own words and seeing how well you can do. This is probably the best way to improve in passage questions because rather than having to just solve questions where you have to figure out all these different things all at once, you can just focus on the comprehension portion of it. We literally have these different tiers here. It's actually going to give you harder passages as you go through it. So you're not just going to get easy passage after easy passage after easy passage. You're going to get increasingly difficult ones. So that's also why it's really good. And we have a bunch of other logic in here as well. But try using this if you haven't used it before. If you're in Mission 1400 Plus, use the thing and use the different techniques while doing so. To end off here, I'm just going to give an example of a few of these passages. I'm just going to read these real quick and comprehend them using the techniques from this thing. And say my thoughts. I just have two here. For decades, so for a very long time, many city planners assumed that widening roads would reduce traffic congestion. Okay, so if you have like bigger roads, if you have larger roads, it's going to make it so the traffic is not happening as much. You're not having like backed up traffic. Initially, this often seemed true because vehicles could move more freely. Okay, so they thought it was probably a true idea because it makes sense. However, researchers later observed a pattern known as induced demand. Okay, so there's some kind of thing they noticed as they started doing this. As driving became easier, more people chose to drive, move farther from work or to trips they previously avoided. Okay, so as it became easier to drive, as they were able to do without as much traffic, more people just start driving. So kind of like a supply and demand thing. As the supply for driving, I guess, went up, basically, more people, I guess. Actually, wait, does that work? Supply and demand. Okay, I don't know. I'm not maybe using the supply and demand correctly here, but As driving became easier, more people did it. As a result, congestion frequently returned. Okay, so they did not have any improvement because people just drove more. Some planners now argue that investments in public transportation, walkable neighborhoods, and cycling infrastructure may ease the traffic more effectively than simply adding road capacity. Okay, so there are much easier ways to do this rather than just increasing the size of the roads. Second passage. When a young painter first exhibited her work, so when this young artist first showed people her paintings, critics praised the technical precision of her landscapes, but described them as emotionally distant. Okay, so it was very like technically good. It was very well painted, but they didn't really have emotion to it. It didn't really feel like honest. It didn't feel true to her. Hoping to gain broader recognition, so hoping to become more famous, she began creating increasingly dramatic scenes designed to impress viewers. Okay, so she wanted to add the drama. She wanted to make it like bigger, more expansive, more exciting. Although these paintings attracted attention, she found the process unsatisfying and eventually returned to quieter subjects drawn from ordinary life. Okay, so I read way too much there, I'll be honest. I did not chunk well enough there, but okay. As these paintings attracted attention, so as they became more popular, she found the process unsatisfying and eventually returned to quieter. Okay, so she eventually realized she should stop doing this. It was not really that exciting. She did not enjoy doing it. Surprisingly, her later work received stronger praise than her earlier efforts. Okay, so after she went back to like her original stuff, she actually got more famous, not less famous. Reviewers argue that the painting's power came not from the spectacle, spectacle, but from their careful observation of familiar experiences. Okay, so it's not because they just looked amazing. It's not because they looked expansive. It's because they were very careful and very like specific in what they drew, which allowed viewers to supply their own interpretations. Okay, so since it's like such a small, minute thing, viewers can like think to themselves, okay, what do all these different things mean? They can think to themselves, what is the deeper meaning there as well? So kind of confusing passage here because like they first say that it's not as good, then she changes it, and then they hate it even more, and then she goes back, and now they like it more. So I'm not really sure what's going on here, but something like that at least. Okay, that is all I have here for the call tonight.